if you were running the Game Awards, and even if you had to be kind of a slimy sellout like Geoff Keighley, what would you do differently? Even if you had to plug ads, you had to plug some stuff that maybe wasn't that like artistically interesting. You were a little fearful of stepping on the toes of some people in the industry because you kind of need them to put on your show. Like all that in mind, how would you handle it differently if you were running it? How would you like pace it and set it up differently?
Right. So I'm gonna completely 180 on you here.
Do it.
Have you heard of Evil Bone Water?
I can't say I have. It sounds wicked and ancient.
It is both. So I really wanted to throw you a curveball right off top here. Backstory. I'm easing my way back into working out. It's been a while since I've regularly worked out. I'm starting to regularly work out. I may or may not have really pushed myself doing shoulder press. Maybe did, one set too many, we'll say.
Gotcha.
So,
little delayed onset muscle soreness, little DOMs going on after some shoulder presses, maybe.
Yeah, let's just say I did like 3 reps to failure in a row that I probably shouldn't have done. And, my wife works at a traditional medicine style clinic where they do, they got like massage, acupuncture, cupping, that kind of thing. And they also have a bunch of, traditional Chinese medicine. And so today, getting home from the gym, she's like, well, your chest hurts. Let's try this Evil Bone Water. And I'm immediately thinking like, okay, well, this is Geoff Keighley getting back. He's cursed. He's come up with some sort of concoction, some sort of curse to set upon me for dishing on him so hard last night because of the Game Awards. Right. That's what's going through my head.
Yeah. Can I ask, did your wife, in the style of the Resident Evil merchant, open a trench coat that was full of the Evil Bone Water, and you kind of had your pick of which vial you were going to imbibe?
Yeah, more or less. Because she's got, because of the clinic, she's got all these, traditional medicines, and yeah, it's in this little like spray bottle. It definitely looks like it's, a witch's potion. And yeah, it's a Chinese topical medicine made for pain relief that's composed of 190 proof Everclear, a ton of imperial grade Chinese herbs and water, and it smells insane. However, it works really well. So it's like this kind of like an icy hot vibe, right? Where it's like this kind of mentholy. It smells crazy. It smells like evil dog water. It smells like how you'd imagine Lords of the Fallen smells, like dog water.
Okay, yeah, yeah, sure. Like when you buy a physical copy and you open up the Joel case and you just get a whiff.
Yeah, it smells like that for sure.
You know why I think you feel so much better though? Because you're drunk. Because it's full of Everclear. You're just wasted. So of course your shoulder feels better.
I've absorbed it through my chest. Yes. 190 proof Everclear and all these Chinese herbs it's loosened me up. I'm feeling good for sure.
It does sound like something Grey Rat would be selling in Firelink Shrine, I will say.
Yeah, you send him off on a mission to Castle Lothric, and he comes back with Evil Bone Water.
Yeah, it's like where did the bones come from? Don't worry about that.
Loretta's bone. Oh, Loretta's bone. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
So you've been spraying some Loretta's bone water on your shoulder, and you're feeling pretty good, huh?
Yeah, feeling much better, especially after last night. I know. To get back to your question, what would I do?
You were thinking it was some karma, though. You're kind of dunking on Keighley at the Game Awards, and it's like, man, I'm screwed up.
Yeah, I'm kind of blaming Keighley for my screwed up shoulders, and now I have to use this Evil Bone Water. But yeah, what I would definitely do, Tara, I'll tell you this, is if I'm gonna host a Game Awards, I'm going to award games. Sounds crazy, I know, but I'm gonna spend time during my Game Awards talking about the awards for the games.
Yeah.
Someone did a breakdown. I wish I could give them credit. I don't have the YouTube clip pulled up, but someone tweeted it out, and there was a total of only 10 minutes worth of speeches in the like 3 hours and 40 plus minute ceremony about Game Awards. Like, that's mind boggling to me that you and I and It was really fun being on your, hanging out with your YouTube chat for the co-stream. That was awesome, by the way. Made it worthwhile. But yeah, out of 190 minutes, a 3-hour long showcase, there were only 10 minutes worth of speeches. It's crazy to me.
Yeah, that's so crazy. They don't really talk about what goes into the awards either. Like
Right.
best art direction in a game. It'd be kind of interesting if someone, even for just 60 seconds, articulated what great art direction means or referenced a few games in the past that have won. And it's like, well, what makes their art direction so special? And then some of the really big awards like RPG and best action game, they just blazed through those. There was no ceremony whatsoever. And I think a lot of us are a little more interested in big new reveals than we are, trophies being handed out. At the same time, it's weird when there's such an afterthought.
Right. A big one for me was I think it was sound design. During the 3-hour, 37 minutes of time that the Game Awards took, they allotted 18 seconds to the score and music category.
Oh my God.
And then interrupted the applause to quickly move forward to the next category. And I think that kind of is the perfect kind of package of what we experienced last night right there.
Yeah, music's so integral to games that it's all right. Like art direction, all of these things are so integral to games. And it's interesting because like Keighley, it's really easy. And I have a Patreon podcast from like a year or two where it's like 30 minutes of me just ripping Geoff Keighley. Like it's pretty brutal. Like I would imagine whoever said, oh yeah, this guy and his channel, they can, he can co-stream the Game Awards. I'm thinking they didn't hear that podcast. He's a really easy guy to make fun of. But I also think his background is worth noting here. Keighley's parents were both big shot executives at IMAX back in like the 80s and 90s. So he was a rich kid. His parents were, white collar. He's a Canadian guy, grew up pretty privileged, and he's not really like an artist. Like he kind of got into like gaming journalism back in the day. I saw somebody dug up this clip of him ripping on Armored Core from like 15 years ago. He's talking about like how he hates mech games. And I think like Armored Core 4 just came out and he's like, oh, I've had enough of this. And it's a terrible game. It's like a 0 out of 10 or it's a 4 out of 10 or something like that. And I think he's kind of this bored, rich kid, didn't really know what to do, got into gaming journalism. One thing leads to the next, right? Parents in IMAX, probably grew up like watching movies, maybe going to some award ceremonies. And he just kind of became this guy who, licked the boots of a lot of other rich and powerful people and ended up, putting on Summer Game Fest and the Game Awards for the last 10 years. And he's not in the industry himself. He's not a dev or a publisher or anything like that. So I'm sure on some level, Geoff does sincerely appreciate games as a medium, and he's wowed by, new tech and visual fidelity and things like that. Mm-hmm. And he likes the hype. I mean, we all do, right? That's part of loving video games, is the anticipation of what's next. Like it's fun. Like it's part of the experience of being a gamer, especially today. So I think he gets off on that. He has fun with it, but at his core, like he's not an artist. He's not a dev. And he's probably not even a gamer in the way like you and I are, or most people are.
Right.
So he is a bit of an odd kind of representative to just be like Mr. Video Games, but then like who else? Because if someone is like the tortured artist, working at some studio, well, that's what they're doing. They're working at some studio. They're not putting on an award show. They have work to do. They're making a game, right? They're designing assets or something like that. So it probably only could be, this kind of business guy with a bit of an ego who wants to rub elbows with the rich and famous. Like that's probably the only guy who could end up putting on shows like this. And I don't know, when you start thinking about all of it, it's like, well, it kind of makes sense. And it kind of makes sense why it's a little underwhelming and why they breeze over the awards and why he doesn't call out corruption in the industry. And he doesn't, it's just, you think about it and it's like, yeah, it kind of all makes sense. But at the same time, he only can show what he has to show. I would imagine he checked in with From and they were probably like, hey, we ain't got anything for you, Geoff. Mm-hmm. So he can only show what he has. But even then, the show should have been organized differently. It feels like maybe close with Kojima or close with, I don't know, just something else. It felt a little underwhelming.
Right.
Monster Hunter Wilds, right? There's a lot of Monster Hunter games. The Monster Hunter fan base is huge. I'm sure the game will sell well. There's going to be a lot of interest around it, but it's like, of course, there's another Monster Hunter game coming out in the next 2 years. Like that's not. It just
Right.
doesn't feel like a show closer to me.
Yeah, I know. I think, while we were watching it live, you mentioned that idea of, having Kojima close it, and how they presented him coming in was super dramatic. I think that would have been perfect closer. I jokingly in chat was like, yeah, I went to get a sandwich or whatever during it. Like, but I literally did. I got up, went to the bathroom, said hey to my wife, got some water, grabbed a snack, came back, and it was like middle of the that like final reveal for Monster Hunter, and I was like, oh, this surely isn't the finale. Like, surely this is just another
Right.
announcement. Like, it definitely didn't feel like, I saw Monster. I was like, okay, yeah, they were talking about Monster Hunter earlier. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
it did not feel like the grand reveal. And yeah, isn't it? It's for a Monster Hunter game for 2025, right?
Yeah, and they specifically said we will have more news for you on this game in December of 2024. Which
it's like,
look,
you should have done this next
even
year.
if that was
then.
from even if that was like if From Software did that, I'd be pissed. I'd be like, that's a lame move. Like that. So even if you're a Monster Hunter
Oh my
fan, you'd be like,
gosh.
come on, that's lame. Like we're
Yeah.
we're telling you that we're gonna have more to tell you about a game 12 months from now that will come out maybe 6 to 12 months after that. Like that's just lame.
Right.
That's lame on Capcom's part. And
Mhm.
it was lame on Jeff's part for making that the closer. And it's maybe pay to play, right? Did Capcom just pay enough money that they got that spot over someone else? But
Mhm.
I don't
And
know.
also,
Jeff is also like, he's so into stroking Kojima's ego, though. I
right.
am a little surprised Kojima didn't close. And yeah, he came through the door and the silhouette with the lighting and all that. And, I think we've all kind of seen after the show how they project that message on the screen where it's like, wrap it up now. And
Yeah.
I've seen some people defending that. They're like, well, these people already know there's a limit and blah, blah, blah. It's like, it still looks
It looks so
tasteless,
bad.
It's
They're already,
distasteful.
yeah, it's distasteful. They play the music. Like, that's everyone has the audio cue. Maybe it's an accessibility thing for some of the presenters, true, but it's just the teleprompter itself. They could have done literally anything. It was like comically big in these bright neon colored numbers counting down from 30, and then it says wrap it up. Like, it's just the most absurd thing. Now let's do like a little visualization exercise here. So everyone close your eyes and picture this, right? You work hard for years on a game. Blood, sweat, and tears of yours go into the production of this game. Finally receive recognition through this prestigious award at the Game Awards, something that you may have been dreaming years to like attend. And now you're being celebrated on that stage. Your fans are excited to hear what you have to say. Your family's excited to hear what you have to say. You want to be able to address them. You want to be able to thank them, thank everyone who supported you, who worked with you, who
You want to
helped you through
acknowledge
that
team
process.
members you had who passed away since
Right,
the
right.
game's development began. That's on your mind as you're standing up there.
Then you only have 30 seconds to give thanks before you're greeted by a giant teleprompter telling you to wrap it up as a musical cue ushers you off the stage, just so Geoff Keighley can play the 14th JRPG announcement trailer of the night.
Or cut away to another Fortnite ad. Yeah. Well, and remember that, he's introduced at the beginning of the show as the creator of the Game Awards, Geoff Keighley. So I would say that means he's responsible for all elements of the show, even if people who work for him are handling them, right? If you're the leader, everything that happens on your watch, ultimately you should be accountable for. Did he stand there and say, hey, that should say wrap it up? I don't know, but he's the creator of the Game Awards.
Right.
So it's on him. It's all on him. And if the show were an hour to an hour and a half, I would understand more why he's trying to be really snappy with the speeches and the acceptances. I would get it. But the fact that we sat there for the second straight year for 3.5 hours, it's unacceptable. It makes no sense. I mean, at least give these people who win their moment in the sun. And you think about last night too, there were some like legends and Anuma was on stage. He's a legend. Sam Lake was on stage. He's a legend. The folks from Cyberpunk and CD PR were up there. I mean, there were big name people on that stage getting played off. It's just weird. It's like, isn't this the goal, Geoff, to have these people on your stage and you're just trying to get them to wrap it up? Like, what? Why even bother?
A lot of people point to the Chris Judge incident of last year where he had the infamous 8-minute long speech that we were all sitting through like, oh my gosh, wrap it up. And maybe Geoff was like so concerned about some of the failures from last year or just some of the incidents. Like that's not even a failure. Like that's just, it happened, so be it. But maybe he really, really wanted to tighten that up.
Bill Clinton kid PTSD.
Bill Clinton kid was just about to, there were things last year that kind of stood out.
But you know what's funny is that Chris Judge's self-parody last night went on for longer than some of these devs were able to speak once they got up on stage. So at every turn, it's like, yeah, this is not run well. Like this could be better. Or the guy in the Achilles boot who was just like, I don't know, testing out a stand-up set for like 5 minutes. It's like, shut up, get off the stage, get on to the next thing. Nobody cares about this. Like we want to see new game reveals, or we want to hear from these big name devs who, like you said, worked really hard and actually won something.
But to be fair, Timothée Chalamet is the embodiment of the average gamer. Right? Am I right? Or am I wrong?
Well, I mean, given that he's the protagonist of Lies of P, I would say so.
Yeah, I don't understand that. I will say.
I mean, thankfully, all the doors were shut in the theater last night because, I mean, one draft through the room would have blown him off the stage. He actually got through his remarks. He seemed so impassioned about them.
But yeah, having good old Timmy boy do the game of the year, announce the game of the year, and I forget what he said, but he was like, his speech was hilarious because he was just phoning it in, or he was just memorized the script. He used like the royal we when he was talking or something. It's like, you didn't play any of these games, Tim. It's cool. You don't have to pretend like you did. Yeah, and not to be the gatekeepy. We're real gamers, not to.
No, not at all. But just have somebody who represents gamers or the industry in there. Don't have Timothée Chalamet.
That's the point. Yeah, for sure. That's our point.
Yeah, and I guess they kind of straddle that line. There are a few folks from the industry who got up there and presented, but the show needs some work. I always feel like a weirdo after these shows because I'm clearly just not the intended audience for 95% of what's shown. Mm-hmm. I'm a curmudgeon. I like Soulsborne, boomer shooters, platformers, racers, none of which really had any presence at the show. So I don't know.
Well, I guess in a brighter approach to covering the Game Awards, what were some of your highlights? Like, what were a few of your top announcements? I know for sure Rise of the Ronin. I think you're pretty hyped on that one.
Yep, that's outside of Shadow of the Erdtree. That's definitely my most anticipated game next year, and it's crazy that it's coming out in March. Didn't think that was going to happen so fast. So yeah, getting a trailer for that, a really great gameplay trailer. We talked about that a lot too in chat last night. Just like the ingredients of a great game trailer, and you see good and bad examples of that during a 3.5-hour show. But that Ronin trailer rolled. That's coming in a couple months. That's really exciting. That was really the only reveal I was excited about. I feel like if you're a big Final Fantasy fan, there was quite a bit to chew on last night. But yeah, like God of War roguelike DLC, I don't really care about that. Yeah, there wasn't much in terms of reveals. I'm just glad Pikmin won Best Strategy Game. Very well deserved. I was glad to see Cyberpunk win Best Ongoing Game. I feel like CDPR has really righted their wrongs. And again, like the wrongs in the first place with Cyberpunk, it was due to the suits, the executives. It wasn't, the artists and the designers and stuff at the studio. It was executives trying to make money. It backfired. And, per usual, the actual artist had to shovel the shit afterward. But I think they've done a great job these last couple of years, and there is an awesome community around that game, and they've added an expansion. I wouldn't even call Phantom Liberty DLC. Like, it's a proper expansion to that game. And then so many free updates. There's just so much content in Cyberpunk. So I feel like that was kind of a cool redemption story. That was a very appropriate award for them to win. And then AC6, if you blinked or sneezed, you would have missed it. But AC6 won Best Action Game, which I think,
game.
Yeah, 2023, very well deserved. That's usually a competitive category, and I certainly feel it was the best action game this year. So that was cool to see. Always love to see From Soft win something. Mario Wonder, which I do like. I don't love in the way I love Pikmin 4, but it's a really good return to form for 2D Mario. I think that was best family game. Glad to see that. That is a pretty easy game to pick up and play with, spouse, friends, siblings, like whatever. I don't know. That might be about the extent of it. Alan Wake 2, which I'm really excited to play. I put it off until 2024 because I want to replay the first game.
Sure.
Yeah, I just want to like have that fresh in mind before I play 2. But I thought that was cool to see it. It won a lot. It kind of stopped BG3 from sweeping the awards like everybody thought it was going to. Like BG3 still won Game of the Year, but what Alan Wake won Best Narrative, Art Direction, Game Direction, it won a ton of awards. So that kind of makes me even more excited to play it. Yeah, I guess I don't know, those are kind of my highlights from last night. What about you? I'm sure a lot of the same, but what about you?
Yeah, a lot of the same. As far as the awards themselves, obviously, yeah, Armored Core 6, Pikmin 4, my personal game of the year. Yeah, probably not Forza winning the best sporting or racing sim or whatever, best racing game.
Racing and sports games should be their separate categories in my opinion. Yeah.
There's also the first Berserker Kazan, which was that kind of like anime Souls game.
That did look good.
Looked interesting. I can't say I'm like super hyped for it, but it looked good. Yeah, it looked.
My first thought was, I hope this gets a demo. I would totally play a demo with this.
Yeah. I remember you saying that for sure. So I'm excited to see what happens, what comes of the Berserker game. And then my last one was probably the Tales of Kenzera Zao, which it's like this new platformer game. The voice of Bayek of Siwa from Assassin's Creed, I think his name is Abubakar Salim. He came out, announced it. I think he's really, really involved with the project. The art style was awesome. It gave like big Ori vibes. The gameplay gave big like Hollow Knight vibes. So yeah, kind of a cool platformer, kind of boss fighty game with a really cool art style that looks pretty incredible. So that's another one that I'm kind of looking forward to.
Yeah, what's like a game of the year list for you? I did that in one of my newsletters where I did kind of rank them, but I called out like 5 games.
5 games from 2023. Like a personal game of the year list.
Yeah.
Oh, this is such a good question.
You said Pikmin 4 is number 1.
Yeah, Pikmin 4 is easily, it's like hands down my game of the year. It's going to be hard for me to come up with the top 5 because I got married. I've been married for a year now, and gaming kind of took a back burner this past year a little bit, with the exception of Souls games, as you know, Tara. So I've pretty much just been playing Souls games when I can.
So what you're telling me is your number 2 game is Dark Souls 3.
Honestly, if we can pull from titles from previous years, yes. My number 2 game is probably Elden Ring. Number 3 is probably Dark Souls 3. Number 4 is probably Valheim. And number 5, just to give another 2023 game a shout, maybe Lies of P, honestly.
Yeah, you enjoyed that.
I really enjoyed it. I'm about 2/3 of the way through it. Haven't finished it quite yet. I've never really enjoyed a Souls-like outside of From Soft games, but Lies of P was just super polished, was true to itself, had an excellent like art style, vision that was like every detail was accounted for, and you felt like you were truly like immersed in this world, which I didn't initially. Coming off the demo of Lies of P when that came out, I was like, this kind of feels slow. It's kind of Dark Souls 2-y, which I love, don't get me wrong, but like the combat was like, the pace kind of was a step back from where we're trying to go with Souls games in my mind. But the more I played it, the more like I really got into it. I think the boss weapons are excellent. The pacing actually, once you get in the rhythm of it, really makes sense. Yeah, the level design is excellent too. I was really, really surprised with Lies of P in a way that I haven't really been surprised with Soulslikes that aren't From Soft Soulslikes. So
yeah, I've heard from a number of people that felt like the demo maybe doesn't show Lies of P in the best light, which is 100%. Kind of too bad. Like then they should have, chosen a different chunk of the game. But yeah, I played the demo. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it either or anything. It just was like, this is okay. Yeah. Like the kind of Bloodborne BioShock stuff is a little heavy-handed for my taste. I'm just such a sucker for a character creator. There's exceptions, but I kind of didn't want to run around like BioShock Yharnam as Timothy Chalamet. Like you said, with sort of the slower combat. But I can definitely sense it's the far more polished game compared to Lords of the Fallen. And yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot of people had a lot of fun with it. So I'm not ruling out revisiting it at some point in the future. I feel like if it gets like a big sale, I might just cop it.
Absolutely worth at least trying. It might not be your cup of tea. I
Mm-hmm.
agree. I'm not super into the whole kind of steampunk vibe in general. But I will say, no spoilers, but it takes some twists and turns through these other environments, but it's still cohesive.
I want to say I think Souls likes are getting better, and I'm
Mhm.
one of the biggest curmudgeons I know about Souls likes. Most people I know enjoy more Souls likes than I do. Like outside of Neo and Mortal Shell to a degree, it's kind of it for me. I tried really hard to like Wo Long. I played a ton of Wo Long.
Mhm.
I'm a
Yep.
big Team Ninja fan, but I have to be honest with myself. Like, I just don't like it. I don't
Yeah.
like the combat. I don't like this, stand around and wait for the enemies to flash their big red dot at you so you can do a perfect parry and then wait to do it again and wait to do it again and wait to do it again. In Sekiro, when you see a red dot on the screen, it's actually a big deal because
Yep.
it means you're either delivering a kill shot or you're transitioning to a new phase of a boss battle. So it kind of in a Pavlovian sense, when you see those red dots in Sekiro, it's like a reward. It really means something. Like I
Mhm.
remember the first time I saw that final red dot when I fought Sword Saint, and it was like I had like an out of body experience. It's like, oh my god, I did it. And in Wo Long, every 10 seconds, you're just standing around waiting to react to one of the enemy's big red flash attacks, and I just don't like that. I miss like the
Mhm.
creative depth that Neo's combat has. So yeah, Wo Long ain't my thing. Lords of the Fallen is not my thing. And Lies of the P isn't really my thing either. I understand why some people have enjoyed all three of those games. I get it. But even though I haven't, I do feel like the bar has been raised. Like those three games this year, this was kind of like the year of the Souls like, and the bar is clearly higher. It's been raised. And I hope it means there are better, third person action RPGs in the future. These games were all fairly derivative, and I feel like you have to kind of have the blinders on to be like, no, they're all incredibly original. Like, even if you enjoyed them, they're clearly all,
Mhm.
borrowing from Sekiro and Bioshock and Bloodborne and Dark Souls. And I'm wondering if like that sort of next wave of Souls likes we get, they kind of learn from this wave, and they're a little more original, they're a little more unique. I get why devs and some publishers probably feel like they need to emulate those formulas because they want to sell games. They want to try to
Mhm.
get people what they want. But I also think you can look at some of the negative feedback or the constructive criticism about those games. I think there's a lot of people who would gladly play something that doesn't feel one to one like a From Soft game, something that feels pretty unique. I think people just love third person action RPG games. I'm optimistic though about the future of Souls
Mhm.
likes. Are you with me on that after this year?
Yeah, 100%. I think both of us feel pretty similarly about Lords of the Fallen. I'm about halfway through it. Don't know if I'm gonna see it through to the end. But yeah, even with Lies of P, even though I definitely really, really enjoyed it, it, like you said, is highly derivative, pulls probably too much pastiche for, like you said, Bloodborne, flavor from Bioshock, even down to while you're like going through levels in Lies of P, especially in like the first area, you'll like go up to windows like in Bloodborne, and there's just like, oh, there's a lit up window with a lantern out front. There's probably an NPC that you talk to, and yeah, sure enough. So yeah, just like little things like that, where it's like, yeah, that's it's completely hands down ripped straight from Bloodborne. Like, there's no, you can't argue against that like whatsoever. So that being said, I feel really, really positive for other studios kind of dabbling, and it's something that I really, really want to see more of. Is like you said, third person kind of action RPGs. To your point earlier, I really love the character creation aspect of these games. So just throw me in a cool world, a cool original world. Let me create a character. Let me fight with, a few different weapons. A little bit of customization for the weapons. I will say Lords of the Fallen kind of knocked it out of the park with just style and swagger. Like, there's so many cool armor sets, tons of really unique weapons. Maybe it's a little bit, they might have gone a little over the top with it, but I think that's one of the strengths that can be seen and taken from Lords of the Fallen is like the customization aspect and like personality and personalization of your character. you can really build upon that. And I'd like to see more of that in these types of games. I would like to see kind of the story that was shown in Lies of P. I think the narrative is one of its strengths. Yeah, I'm definitely feeling confident moving forward that studios are going to hopefully take some of the criticisms that the community has for these games and go with it to make something truly unique and something that we can actually fall in love with.
Yeah, I think you have to create something like super, super unique and original, to give someone that feeling and that drive to go back to the game and go back to the game. And that's why we do go back to FromSoft games, because there's just nothing else like them. You just want that from other devs. And I think it's possible. And I understand, like, people are trying to sell games. That's why they are mirroring so many elements of Soulsborne. But I'm hoping for more originality moving forward. I mean, we were talking about last night during the Game Awards. You still see how many games look like Genshin Impact and Breath of the Wild. And it's like, come on, man, like, do something different. Like, this has been done. That's all we want. Let's talk about Shadow of the Erdtree.
Okay, yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I was so convinced we were going to see it last night.
It
felt like a safe bet. It did.
And I think I even told you this months ago. I was convinced we were just going to get a shadow drop. It was just going to be announced and be like, boom, you can play it right now.
So Katao, Yasuhiro Katao, who does marketing for FromSoft, he recently said that it's still a ways off. And I think anytime Miyazaki or Katao or anybody with the studio says anything, people like to say, well, it could be like a translation thing or something. And I would say in this case, it wasn't. I think he was probably, that was a clear translation. It's not ready yet, which makes me think if they didn't have anything to show last night, that must mean it's coming out after March. That's my guess now. And it takes me back to the keyword, and that one post and one image we got was that Shadow of the Erdtree is an expansion. It's expanding the game of Elden Ring. It's not just a DLC episode like, Ashes of Ariandel or something. You and I have talked quite a bit about maybe this is going to be a Scholar of the First Sin situation where there's almost like volumes of DLC content, and maybe there's remixed base game content, and maybe there's even like visual enhancements. Like that's an expansion, right? Scholar's an expansion. So Elden Ring is such a bigger, more complex game than Dark Souls 2. Maybe we really are in for something like that, right? Like maybe when we finally see what it is, we'll understand why it was a 2-year wait. But I just keep going back to that keyword that it's an expansion. Like maybe we don't quite understand what they're actually working on. What are your thoughts right now?
No, I think you're spot on. Just looking back at the DLCs we've seen from previously, probably most notably Dark Souls 3, the split between Ashes of Ariandel and the Ring City. I'm kind of envisioning like those two combined as far as the scale of the production, and even upon that, like world-wise and the advancements that From has gone through over the last, basically decade at this point. It's going to feel like unimaginable, the scale of kind of what I'm picturing, maybe 4 times the size of both DLCs from DS3 in my mind. So it'll be open world. It'll be like kind of like how we've seen the layering in Elden Ring. We've got the Celia and the underground area of the map, top map, and then we've got mountaintops of the giants. You've got, where Malekith is hanging out over in Farum Azula. It's just going to be a whole other part of the map that just opens up, and it's going to feel, I'd love to see them almost double the size of the Elden Ring map. And it honestly doesn't feel that far off. Like that doesn't feel like that ambitious of a want in this DLC, is to see the map almost doubled.
I wonder too what the balance will be with the amount of content it seems like we're in store for.
Right.
What the balance will be between open world content and dungeon content. Because it would almost seem like in something like this, like new legacy dungeons and more of the small dungeons and stuff, that's maybe going to be like more essential to the experience, like that kind of very curated design content versus more swaths of open world. But then it's very, very hard to predict. I am wondering, like you were talking about how the map is very layered. I wonder if the DLC, like it could be like the hub, it could be like Roundtable where you just teleport to it. Or what if it's like another layer? How you can kind of swap back and forth between your 2 map layers. What if the expansion is just like a 3rd layer?
We get the classic Dark Souls transition where these little weird imp little guys that come in, they fly in, they pick you up, and they like bring you up into the clouds.
Well, I've always wondered about getting on top of the Erdtree. I always wondered if the game was going to go there because when you look up at the Erdtree, you almost can't see where it ends. I don't know. Yeah, they love
Mm-hmm.
taking us up high.
You
They
know,
love taking us down low. I just kept wondering about that. I mean, maybe they'll still do it. I don't know.
yeah, it'd be interesting. So the transition from the mountaintops of the giants to Fair Missoula to back to the capital, right? So the capital goes through this transition phase. Like time passes and it's completely desolate and deserted, and it's the same area on the map, right? But it's completely changed.
Mm.
What if, and this is a shout to one of our favorite bosses from this game, Tara. What if Dragon Lord Placidusax speeds up time or rewinds time in a weird way to where we like the whole map just like reverts to this like Miquella's dream or whatever this thought that people are kind of theorizing with the big fields. Miquella's like dream of what the world used to be.
Well, yeah, because the Dragon Lord was Elden Lord. I think the flavor text is in the age before the Erdtree,
Hmm.
whose seat lies at the heart, what is it, of the storm beyond time. It's like one of the coolest
Yeah.
bits of flavor text. Yeah, I mean that right. There's seeds of that idea you're getting at there. I don't know. When you start a new game and you come out of the stranded graveyard, you can see the kiln, the giant's fire kiln way up in the mountaintops. You can actually see it from those first steps you take out into Limgrave. So it just makes me wonder, like, it's like the whole world's there. You come
Mhm.
out of the underground, you can see the highest point, Limgrave's in front of you. It's like, where does the DLC like real
Mhm.
estate live? That almost
Right.
feels like the biggest question. And to your point, it could be like it could almost be like a time, like a space-time kind of thing where it's not just like, oh, it's like Fair Missoula, it's way up here in the sky
Mhm.
somewhere. It could be like a different plane of existence in their dimension. Like Elden Ring is super cosmic in its scope. So it's anybody's guess. I have
Yeah.
no idea.
And back to the time thing, like we've seen like time dilation in the DLCs before, specifically with Bloodborne. And you can kind of speak to that a bit more than I can, but the whole, the Hunter's DLC or whatever from
Yeah.
Bloodborne it's just a different timeline, but it's the same. Like there are parts that are identical as far as the let's call it like the cathedral district. Right away in the DLC, you're like, oh, I know this place, but something's different, something's off here.
Yeah, the Hunter's Nightmare, where it's Cathedral Ward, but yeah, like a twisted version of it. And
Mm-hmm.
there's old hunters and like their old garb and their old weapons. And it is like a little bit of a remix of Cathedral Ward, that first area of the old Hunters DLC. I've wondered about that too. Given that they created such a huge and crazy map, would they remix sections of it? And that could go back to your point about time. It
Mm-hmm.
could be in the past, it could be in the future. It almost seems like it would be based on that one image we got and the fact that it looks like there's a tree wrapped around the Erdtree. There's like
Mm-hmm.
something almost snake-like, like squeezing this golden ooze out of the Erdtree. That's kind of what it looks like. Makes me
Mm-hmm.
think it might be the future, especially because it's
Right.
Miquella. Maybe Miquella has like woken up, and because it's like Miquella on Torrent riding toward this sort of like corrupted Erdtree or something. So yeah, it could be the past, it could be the future. I don't know. I kind of think the future. Well, it's really hard to say because then if it's set in the future, it
Mm-hmm.
feels like From might have to put their foot down about like canon a little bit, like what happens. It's always been
Right.
kind of interesting how they've handled that with DLCs. Like they've sort of found ways to work around that, like with old hunters, really going back in time, like showing you what happened in the fishing hamlet. And even with the DS3 DLCs, they're meant to be experienced prior to that final showdown with the Soul of Cinder and like sort of the fate of that universe. So it's so hard to guess like where they'd place it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I'm looking at the image again, and to your point of it being in the future, there are all these like kind of ghostly gravestones that are just. It's almost like
Yep.
they're the shadows of literally shadow of the Earth Tree, shadows of what once was in the lands between. So this I'm more so now on board of it being in the future, and I love the idea of Miquella waking up, from his egg in the Mogwin Palace or wherever he's hanging out with Mog, and then yeah, you end up following him to the future. Basically, we're doing a Back to the Future type thing, except Torrent's the DeLorean.
Mm. Ronnie and Melina both make some cryptic comments about Torrent and Torrent's former master. Maybe that master was Miquella, who's first slumbering and then stolen away by Moog, so he has no use for his mount. And maybe that's why Torrent is gifted to you instead. And perhaps Torrent is the catalyst for the DLC. Maybe Torrent leads you to Miquella or something like that. Maybe you lose Torrent, or I don't know. Something with Torrent definitely makes sense. But with the expansion, I don't know. Maybe you'll even access it instead of like you do in past games, say like midway through a playthrough, you'll actually select it on the main menu. Like you start a new game in the expansion versus a new game in the base game. So From could even pull a fast one on us here, and it could turn out that the person on the horse isn't even Miquella, or maybe the horse isn't even Torrent, but I'm not so sure about either of those possibilities. And you have to remember about Miquella, it says in the game, like, he created the Haligtree. So that's kind of interesting. Because he wanted to, like, allow himself to grow to be an adult to save his sister. Because he realized the Golden Order would not be able to cure the Scarlet Rot. Miquella is interesting because even though we don't see him in the game, he's a little like Ronnie in the sense that it seems like he was questioning everything. Morgott is really interesting because he's kind of stubborn and he's trying to like sort of fulfill this duty that he believes he has, you know? And then like people like Ronnie and Miquella are total opposites where they're questioning everything. I mean, you know, some of the others do as well, but it's more like intellectual, philosophical, I feel like, with Ronnie and Miquella. I feel like Miquella is somebody who just kind of wasn't buying it. Like he was kind of over this Golden Order thing. Yeah, I just brought this up. My brother will keep his promise. He possesses the wisdom, the allure of a god. He is the most fearsome Empyrean of all. Melania says that about him. Because I wonder, like, are we going to have to go find him? Will he be an ally? Will he be an enemy? A boss? Is this a corrupted version of Miquella? You know, did Moog's experiment and, you know, the influence of the Formless Mother or whatever actually corrupt Miquella? Or, you know, does Miquella overcome whatever happened?
Right.
Is Miquella dead? Is this set in the past? Is this set in the future? Ooh, or what if Miquella overcame his curse and you fight him as an adult? Like he actually grows out of his child form and you face him as like Super Saiyan Miquella at the end of the expansion or something, you know? Yeah, you just wonder like what the relationship will be to him.
Right. Yeah, I feel like he's got to be. I mean, as much as I'd love to kind of have Miquella be a Melania type where he just kind of follows you from side of grace to side of grace and kind of explains everything, it doesn't really seem suiting to the most powerful Empyrean. You know, like I feel like we're going to end up duking it out with Miquella. I think that's best case scenario.
Well, and does Moog corrupt him too? I guess we don't really know the end result.
Yeah, and kind of in another reflection to Moog is like you know, in the base game, you fight Moog twice, right? You fight him underneath the Capitol, but also the primary fight being in Mogwin Palace. So maybe that's reflected in Miquella too, where you fight him in two different phases in the future. One where he's corrupted by Moog, and one, the final boss of the DLC, where he's back to like his kind of purified, I guess you could call it, being, the like true Empyrean form. Miquella being the end boss.
Yeah. With him too, we know that people really liked him. He was sort of seen as Marika's successor, but then it seems like he maybe like wasn't interested, or I don't know if he got to like fulfill that, you know, sort of prophecy or whatever. You know, he gets kidnapped obviously by what I guess Moog's his like half brother. And I think Moog's kind of possessed by the Formless Mother. I mean, it gets very murky and like what, you know, kind of what's going on here and what all the motivations are. But to go way back, we know Morgott is ashamed of his omen blood that he's born with, which is why he and Moog are initially cast down into the subterranean shunning grounds. But Moog embraces that curse. And I think we're led to believe underground, Moog makes contact with this Formless Mother who ignites his blood and gives him this power of fire magic. And eventually he steals Miquella away, believing that he and his brother can eventually roll at the top of some new dynasty. But that plan does not seem to work. Moog seems pretty delusional. There's obviously no signs of consent from Miquella, who appears unconscious at best, maybe even dead. in the palace inside his egg. We just don't know if Moog's meddling actually affected Miquella in some kind of meaningful way.
Yeah, it's something that we're gonna have to kind of meditate on for, unfortunately, a little bit longer, it seems.
I mean, not a whole lot more probably to say about it, but just looking at this image again, because it does appear that we're seeing the Erdtree,
Yep.
maybe like a withered version of the Erdtree in the future, but there's a second tree wrapped around it. And I don't know if that's the Haligtree or if we're supposed to believe that it's the Haligtree, because I think the story is that Miquella, in an attempt to heal himself and his sister, he's the eternal child and she's got the rot.
Mhm.
So he's almost like a scientist or like a philosopher or something. He's trying to like meditate and come up with a solution. And I think it's that he creates the Haligtree with his own blood. He like waters a sapling with his blood, and that turns into the Haligtree, which then he like burrows into and sort of enters like this hibernation state where he's trying to meditate on a solution. And he's got all these people who are loyal to him. People love him. He's got like this loyal guard, and then Moog kidnaps him. And we know, Melania, her rot progresses and becomes crazy, and we encounter her and all of that. So I just looking back at this picture, I'm wondering, is this Miquella waking up in the distant future? And if Moog corrupted him, does that mean the Haligtree is corrupted as well? And is that what we're seeing? Or I mean, it could be unrelated to all of that. I don't know. I guess that's just my best guess, is that maybe the Haligtree, because it's made of his blood, is also corrupted. We can't really place even where this would be in like the existing game map, which makes me think this is like another layer or in the distant future, or like you said, this is time. Like time has something to do with this.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe he is Torrent's original owner. And Torrent is kind of that catalyst that gets us into the new content. I don't know. I guess those are my final thoughts on it. But I'm no less intrigued, even though the wait is kind of excruciating. Like I'm as interested as ever in like what they're doing with this and where they're taking us, and like the locations we're going to explore and the types of enemies and bosses we're going to fight. Like you can't even really begin to imagine like where they're taking us, because that's what they do so well, right? They take us to like crazy places and put us in crazy situations. So like what's this crazy situation going to be?
This is making me kind of like go back to when we were on the hype train leading into Elden Ring. We're returning to that mind space of like, oh, there's like this huge FromSoft like cultural phenomenon that's about to like occur that we're on the cusp of, and we're just like, all we can do is sit here and like contemplate it. We're just like, the hype is building. So like, to From's credit, like maybe this is maybe they could have dropped the trailer last night and they were like, you know what, we took the pulse, and the hype isn't there yet. The hype isn't there yet. They're not freaking out enough. They're not thinking about this at every single second of every waking hour of their days quite yet. Let's give them a couple more months to just think about it.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, and if the expression like "let them cook" has ever been appropriate for any studio, it's From.
Yeah, let them cook. Let them cook.
Yeah, let them cook. And I'm just, I'm thinking back to like Ashes of Ariandel when they announced that, because DS3 came out in March. Ashes of Ariandel, I want to say they announced it in August and it dropped in October. So that was kind of the timeline. And I remember when they announced it, they shared, I think they might have announced it with the trailer, but I remember like the promotional images of the chapel and the snow, and they weren't ambiguous about it at all. They're like, you're going to like the frozen waste of Ariandel, and it's ruined and it's weird, and you're going to explore it. And it was like, okay, like we're going to this weird snowy realm. Is it like an adjacent place to Lothric? Like we didn't know it was a painted world. We didn't know that, which was probably the most important part, but we knew we were going to like this snowy realm that was really screwed up. And it was like, okay, and there's like a chapel, and you could just, the big bridge, and you could start putting the pieces together in your mind. We just don't have anything to go off of like that.
As far as, obviously, we've been speculating an announcement up until yesterday, and now we're going to start speculating future announcements for the DLC. Do you have a time frame in mind, or an ideal kind of like when do you see them dropping a trailer? Like, is it beginning of Q1? I'm trying to think of different events, like different Japanese like live game events that I'm spacing on. Obviously the game Japanese Game Awards, I think, were already came and went.
Yeah, Tokyo Game Show
Um,
I think is September. So
yeah.
yeah, I don't. I was convinced we were going to get it at maybe around the 2 year anniversary, like Q1.
Mm,
So now it kind of seems like that's not happening. So hopefully we at least get like the big release date, gameplay reveal, world reveal trailer in Q1. Like even if it doesn't come out in Q1, maybe
mm,
we still get that in the next couple months. And then
right.
if that happens, does that mean it's like a Q2? Maybe it's like a late spring, early summer release. I feel like anything beyond summer would be kind of a bummer.
Yeah, it seems
I mean, we'll
pushing
wait
it, and
for it, and
also,
I'm sure it'll be great. But
yeah,
it is kind of turning into an unusually long wait.
yeah,
Um,
especially for From, who are
yes,
pretty punctual and also pretty like easy to like. They have windows like historically, like February, March, like mid March. We typically see releases. You know, they're relatively easy to forecast, I would say, up until Elden Ring. Elden Ring's kind of been the one curveball game with From. So yeah, I don't know. I'd love to see an end of January release. I don't know why that's like January 21st. I feel like the March 20 something is usually when games release. So I'm feeling like maybe
yeah,
January 21st, January 23rd, kind of in that range of just like a little just out of nowhere they're just going to drop a trailer type vibe is kind of what I'm hoping for. And then
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. At this point, that would almost seem fitting if it just shocked
mhm.
us some random day. And hopefully, at this point, because it has been a long wait, once they announce it, there's not a very big gap between the announcement and when we actually get to play it.
Exactly. So I'm kind of picturing end
But
of
will it be
January.
almost like full cost? That's what I'm wondering. Like, given the volume of content, and they're gonna have to, they're gonna have to communicate that in some kind of way, depending on what the price point is. Because is this the kind of thing where the price point's like $40? Is it almost like the value of the base game because it's so much content? I don't
Right.
know.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I feel like it kind of has to be at this point, considering when they announced it. They announced it back. I don't even know how long it's been.
It was on the 1 year anniversary or like right around there.
Okay, so it was probably February, late February. So I mean, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I can't imagine it being. At this point, it's definitely not a small DLC. It's not going to be a small DLC expansion.
No.
I can see it being, $40.
If it's $100, I don't care.
Yeah, obviously for us, we're gonna buy it no matter what the price is. But
Just think about this. Beyond our hopes for cool new weapons and ashes and legacy dungeons and boss battles, we know that Elden Ring is basically a sci-fi game masked as fantasy. Like the Golden Order is essentially an alien force that has more or less colonized the lands between. And,
right,
someone like Radon, his sort of self-appointed duty is to hold back these cosmic events, like meteors crashing into the Earth, from the Ronnie ending and its implications to the existence of something like Estelle. As much as we might guess right or wrong about Shadow of the Erdtree, the possibilities are endless. And Miyazaki and Tanimura like to subvert our expectations and dive into weird, unpredictable territory with their games. So I just can't wait.